For regular videos on ancient cultures and forgotten civilizations, please subscribe. One thing I can tell you is that if you want to see all of Saqqara, one day is not enough. There is so much here, and we just couldn't squeeze everything in. But one part of the cemetery that is a must-see is the Serapeum, and that is where we went next. What is a Serapeum? Well, the name comes from the Ptolemaic period in Egyptian history, when the Macedonians and Greeks dominated Egypt. At that time, the Greeks were promoting the worship of a hybrid Greek-Egyptian god known as Serapis. It was a god of their own invention, but it was their attempt to unite Greek and Egyptian religion and unify the country. Serapis included aspects not only of the Greek god Zeus, but also the Egyptian gods Osiris and the Apis bull. The rulers presented the cult as a continuation of an earlier Egyptian one. In fact, the name Serapis is a shortened form of Osiris Apis. A Serapeum refers to any holy place dedicated to Serapis, usually temples. But in this case, it refers to a sacred burial ground for the Apis bulls. What's an Apis bull? The Apis bull is the chief object of worship of the cult of Osiris Apis, which was the most sacred of all the ancient Egyptian bull cults. An actual living bull was chosen to be the Apis bull. It was carefully selected. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, the Egyptians believed that a flash of lightning descended from heaven upon a cow, giving her the Apis power. This allowed her to give birth to a special bull, which could be identified by certain distinct markings. He would have a white diamond on his forehead, an image of an eagle on his back, double the number of hairs on his tail, and a scarab mark under his tongue. When a new Apis bull was needed, the priests would go looking for such a bull. When they found one, there would be a special festival in Memphis that lasted for 7 days, and the bull would be part of a sacred parade through the city. It was believed that on this occasion, if the bull breathed upon any child, that child would have the ability to predict the future. Here we're going. Now, if I recall, the original entrance is down here or something. Okay. So this is the modern entrance, but I think this was the original entrance down here. French archaeologist Auguste Mariette discovered the Serapeum of Saqqara in 1851, but the first Apis bulls were buried here before the Serapeum was ever constructed. The Egyptians simply made isolated tombs for them. This was during the New Kingdom in the 18th and 19th dynasties. There are 6 of these tombs that have been discovered so far, which consisted of a chapel above ground and a substructure beneath. Stone stelae and inscribed artifacts were found in them that revealed the dates of the bulls' interment. Mariette found 4 of these isolated tombs completely undisturbed. Bull remains were found inside wooden coffins. The bulls had been dismembered and not mummified, indicative of an earlier practice, and they had deteriorated considerably over the centuries. It was Khemweset, the son of King Ramses II, who constructed the first elaborate catacombs for the Apis bulls. This area of the Serapeum we call the Lesser Vaults. The Lesser Vaults are not currently open to the public because of their unsafe condition. The bulls interred in the Lesser Vaults were from the time of the 19th to the 26th dynasties. Then Pharaoh Psamtik I decided to begin construction of a new set of vaults, which are known today as the Greater Vaults. Mariette found a stela in the very first vault, which described Psamtik's construction project. It relates how the condition of the lesser vaults had deteriorated to a point that they could no longer be used, and so the king began work on a series of new vaults. It is the Greater Vaults that the public can visit, and that is where we're going now. The modern entrance is actually the entrance constructed in the early 5th century BCE during the reign of Darius the Great, a Persian emperor who ruled Egypt. We know this from a stela documenting this construction project. The new entrance was larger than the old one, making it easier to get the sarcophagi in. In fact, earlier in Darius's reign, a sarcophagus had gotten stuck in one of the passageways. It's still there. The catacombs were carved right into the limestone bedrock. Mariette found between 1,200 and 1,300 stone stelae in the Serapeum that commemorated the lives of the Apis bulls that were interred here. After a bull was interred, the tomb would be sealed by a brick wall with niches, and stelae were placed in the niches. These stelae provide the names of the bulls, the dates of their births and deaths, the dates of their interment, including the name of the reigning king, information about the presiding priests, and also in some cases, a description of how the sarcophagus was made and how it was transported into the vault. Other stelae were placed in niches in the tunnels. When Mariette found them, some were still in the walls, but many were lying on the floor, because the walls closing off the tombs had been dismantled by looters and vandals. Still, there were thousands of less valuable artifacts that the robbers had left behind. The stelae and the artifacts can now be found in museums, most of them in the Louvre in Paris. This is the Serapeum's first ever sarcophagus carved in stone, pink Aswan granite in this case. It was placed here in 547 BCE during the reign of King Amosa I. Mind you, they had been making stone sarcophagi for kings for some time, but not for Apis bulls. Take a look at the beautiful craftsmanship, definitely of higher quality than even the sarcophagi of the kings of the Old Kingdom. Look at the work done on these hieroglyphs. The people who made this were masters of their work. But where's the lid? It's down the hall. Here we have the lid. The inscription on the top says, King Amosa dedicated his monument to the living Apis, a great sarcophagus of granite. Now His Majesty found that it had not been made in costly stone by any king at any time, that he might be one who is given life forever. This clearly shows it was the first to be made of costly stone. This hallway was hollowed out some years after the sarcophagus was placed in its chamber, so that means this lid was taken off the sarcophagus and placed here in later times. I was looking at this drawing of a sarcophagus found by Mariette, and I can't help but notice it looks a lot like the one we're talking about. If so, it would indicate that the lid was still on it when it was found in the 1800s. Maybe it was Mariette's men that moved it. We are currently in the Persian section of the greater vaults. This sarcophagus was placed here by Kabash. He led a rebellion against the Persians around 338 BCE and reigned for only 3 years. This was right before Alexander the Great conquered Egypt. There is a dead-end tunnel behind the sarcophagus. What it was supposed to be for, we don't know, but it probably was intended by Darius the Great to be a new section, and it was never completed. While there are a couple of sarcophagi made of granite and 1 or 2 of limestone, the rest of the stone sarcophagi are made from granodiorite, probably from Aswan. It's the same stuff the Rosetta Stone is made from.
Beautiful. Look how huge this is. Beautiful. Beautifully crafted sarcophagus. Look at this. This is a little rougher here, but these walls are beautifully smooth. They used to polish them with sand. Sometimes you'll hear people say that the dimensions are perfect. They're not perfect, but they're close to perfect. The Serapeum is the place where the sacred Apis bulls were buried. There's only ever one Apis bull reigning at one particular time, but when it died, they would choose a new one, and then the dead bull would be interred here in one of these sarcophagi.
When an Apis bull died, it would be treated like royalty. The body of the bull would be embalmed and decorated at the Temple of Ptah in Memphis, which I told you about last time, and the bull would be brought to its tomb in a great ceremony. We have a papyrus document from the 26th dynasty that lays out the whole procedure.
This is so incredible. This is sort of what you would imagine a tomb to be like from the movies or from the storybooks.
It's almost more like a crypt because it's huge. It's like it's more like catacombs because so
like
many
the catacombs,
bulls were buried here. Yeah. Interred here, I should say.
Yeah. You can imagine them just being led through here.
Yeah.
No two sarcophagi are alike, which means that they are individualized, and therefore were not made in a factory. The smallest stone sarcophagus weighs approximately 20 tons, and the largest about 45 tons. The heaviest lid weighs about 25 tons. They also vary greatly in quality. 13 of them are polished to a smooth finish, and they are among the latest in the Serapeum. The Ptolemaic section has the largest sarcophagi and the largest chambers. Mariette found 13 stelae corresponding to the 13 chambers in this section, which provide information about each of them. But since they were scattered about, scholars have had to solve the puzzle of which one goes with which. Interestingly, another stela was found, which was written by an architect from the time of Ptolemy II, which describes in detail how he had constructed one of the burial chambers and how he had a sarcophagus brought in and put into it. It was a little more than a year's worth of work, but it was stretched over a period of about 6 years.
Notice a lot of them are slightly ajar, and that's because that's how there's no more mummies in them. Someone pushed it aside and took out the contents at some point in antiquity. We're in the section where these are the Ptolemaic ones. Yeah, so this is the Ptolemaic section. So these have the newest sarcophagi. And the oldest part of the Serapeum, which is over there, was all the bulls had wooden sarcophagi. But they got fancier over time, and we're now here in the Ptolemaic era where these huge black granite sarcophagi were used. Yeah. Yeah. These are beauties, aren't they?
Yeah, they're incredible. It's still hard to wrap your mind around how they managed this.
You'll find that the quality of the sarcophagus is often inversely proportional to the length of time the Apis bull lived. This is evidence that one sarcophagus took a long time to make. How were they made? Indications are that both the sarcophagus and its lid were created out of a single, roughly quarried stone. The 6 sides of the block were cut with a metal saw, iron in this period, and a wet sand abrasive. The abrasive is what wore away the stone, not the saw. Then the same procedure was used to cut off the lid. Tube drills were then used to make holes in the block as a way to start hollowing out the interior. Chisels of either stone or metal would then be used to finish out the hollowing. Smaller, more refined tools would then be used to carve out the corners. Abrasives would be used on the interior and exterior to grind the sides flat. The pockmarks you see are where they hollowed out imperfections to keep the stone from fracturing further. Finer abrasives would be used for polishing, and as we showed you at the Djoser colonnade, glues, resins, or varnishes could also be used to get a beautiful shine. Hieroglyphs would be added last by a different group of specialists. For an in-depth discussion of the making of a sarcophagus, check out the Serapeum series by the Ancient Presence channel. Part 1 deals with the process. You might wonder how such large sarcophagi could have been moved into place. Was there enough room to maneuver them? The short answer is yes. If you want to see the measurements, the YouTube channel Sacred Geometry Decoded calculates the room needed in his video on the Serapeum, Part 1. Currently, the floor of the Serapeum is covered by a wooden walkway, and you can get glimpses of it through little windows. But the floor left interesting clues that Mariette noticed and recorded in his writing. He found traces of the wooden rollers used to transport the sarcophagi through the tunnels. He also found 2 wooden winches in one of the tombs. Prussian archaeologist Heinrich Bruch noted the remains of double rails in one of the corridors over which the logs would have been rolled. For fuller discussion of how the sarcophagi were moved, see the excellent video made by the Scientists Against Myths channel, called The Impossible Sarcophagi of the Serapeum. They calculated that it would take 16 men to move the heaviest of the sarcophagi down the corridor. Even more interestingly, Mariette found that one of the sarcophagi had not been fully lowered into its alcove. The alcove was filled with sand up to the level of the tunnel floor, and the sarcophagus was on top. As an experiment, he had 4 of his men dig out the sand on each side, and the process lowered the sarcophagus gently to the floor. The endeavor took a little less than 2 hours. This is how he verified how the Egyptians lowered these heavy boxes into their final resting places.
This is probably the second to last, maybe, sarcophagus. This is one of the final ones that was put in here. And you can see the quality of the sarcophagi in this Ptolemaic part of the complex. Their sarcophagi are the best. But this one was not completed. And one of the reasons why we know it isn't completed is because, well, first of all, the hieroglyphs that are scratched on here, they're just in a draft version. They're not completed. And in fact, here is the cartouche for the king that would have been reigning when the bull was interred, but there's nothing in it, okay? Because they weren't sure yet who the king was going to be when the bull died, right? But then the bull died, and often happens with the tombs or any funerary stuff. If it isn't done, it doesn't matter. The person died or the bull died, and you just put them in there anyway, as is. And so they stuck it in here without it being finished, and that was that. But we've been kind of studying the order of the sarcophagi in here, and we've narrowed it down, and we think that probably this was during the reign of Cleopatra VII's father, Ptolemy XII.
This sarcophagus dates to the 7th year of Ptolemy XII, the father of the famous Cleopatra. That would be 74 BCE, only a few decades before the Romans took over. We only know it's Ptolemy XII from documents that name the kings who interred bulls here. Although certainly a magnificent sarcophagus, there are numerous imperfections on it. The stone polishers did their best to hide them.
Ehab.
This sarcophagus, left here in the tunnel, is the last sarcophagus brought here. It was probably intended to go into chamber K'. It is roughly shaped and never made it to its destination. The lid was left on the ground nearby. It's from 30 BCE, the time of the Roman conquest of Egypt. This may be why the work was abandoned abruptly. Augustus Caesar ordered that the Serapeum be closed down. Roman historian Cassius Dio describes Augustus as being invited to worship the Apis, and he replied, "I'm accustomed to worshiping gods, not cattle." The Serapeum was continually looted over the centuries that followed, and Christians deliberately desecrated it as a statement against paganism, scratching out the names of bulls and inscriptions, destroying the mummies, and piling stones in and on top of the sarcophagi.